Welcome to the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. This is episode 60, Daybreak. My name is Tyler.
Hello, this is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
In this episode, we're going to talk about some of the games we've been playing lately. We've got an interview with designer Matt Leacock, and then we'll get into our feature review of his newer games, Daybreak.
That's right.
Yeah. The co-op king.
The co-op king.
He is. He kind of defined the genre, really. There was other co-op games before pandemic.
Yeah.
But he, really became popular with his designs for sure.
Well, and we'll talk about it, but Daybreak is, I think, potentially there to rival Pandemic.
Well, and it
me.
And it's a totally different system than Pandemic.
It is.
It's a totally different system than the Forbidden games. There's some exciting things going on.
And anytime Tyson talks positive about a cooperative game,
I mean,
and who knows, maybe he won't. We'll see. I think he might have some good things to say. I mean, that's impressive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, for those who have listened for any amount of time know that I don't typically like co-op games. I think the last co-op game that we reviewed as a podcast was the episode I wasn't on, that for Aeon's End.
Could have been. Like, when did we do
We did Cthulhu Death May Die.
That's true.
Point.
Yeah. And that's an exception to the rule. You love that game, right?
Well, and that's more, in my head, more of a narrative experience, right? And so, like, I'm talking about a strictly cooperative experience where it's like the puzzly co-ops, and this is more in line with that.
Yeah, and for sure, like Aeon's End or a Pandemic or something like that. Yeah.
But yeah.
All right.
Lots of exciting things going on. New Pearl Jam album coming out.
That's right. Yeah, they've been releasing new songs, which I like the songs that they released so far.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I went to AMC.
I heard that you did that.
Yeah.
Like,
I've never done this before. So just really quick, a buddy invited me, and so we went and ate German food. Not as good as Schmidt's in Ohio, in Columbus.
yeah.
But
Not many places are, but yeah.
But it made me think of Schmidt's, and I'm excited to go back. But then we went to AMC and sat in the dark and listened to the new Pearl Jam album a few days ago, and before the whole album was released. And I had gone to work at like 5:30 in the morning, so I had a really hard time staying awake. But after they went through the album once, then they played it again with lyrics and like a screensaver, enhanced visuals, right?
Yeah.
And it was so much better the second time through. I wish they would have just put the lyrics up there, because Eddie Vedder's not the easiest dude to understand.
If you understand 10% of what he says, it's a good, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't think that was as glowing of an endorsement as you think it is.
It's not
Did you
that
just say that you fell asleep listening to it the first time, and then because they put the words on the screen, you were able to endure it?
That was my point, though. Like, I wish they would have just put the lyrics up to begin with. They wanted
Fair
you
enough.
to have an audio-only experience.
Okay, yeah.
And I'd worked at like a 12-hour day and then gone. I was fighting it. I liked the songs the first time through. The second time through, some of the songs I was blown away by how good they were. And you hear songs more than one time, and it starts to
Grow on you a little bit.
Yeah, and it did. Still doesn't compare to 10 or Versus or
those are classics.
Even Vitalogy, I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, I like Vitalogy.
Yeah. There were a couple songs where I was like, that sounds just like Spin the Black Circle. But
Okay. Which is not horrible, because that song's great, but yeah.
I like their slower songs. But anyway, it was I'd never done that before. Just go sit in the dark in the theater with a bunch of other middle-aged dudes listening to Pearl Jam.
I did that once. I went to a Pink Floyd laser light show.
Oh yeah, I've done that before.
In Salt Lake.
In Salt Lake.
Yes.
Yeah. And
at the planetarium.
Everybody else but me was on acid. It was an experience.
So you enjoyed watching other people.
Yeah, it was fun people watching experience for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was a unique experience. I enjoyed it. I had fun. And it was cool to hear the new music.
Nice.
So,
That's awesome. New Taylor Swift album coming out. Huh? You
So
guys
let's talk
excited
about
for that?
board games, guys. Let's talk about what this podcast is about.
I have a house full of girls, and they are huge Taylor Swift fans. So there's no getting around it for me, right? So
Yeah, well, if Ben were here, he'd be right on your side.
oh
with
yeah,
that
there you
too,
go.
so.
Ben's a huge Taylor Swift fan too, so
Yeah, I'm a hard pass on
hard
that
pass
one.
on that
Yeah.
one. I don't mind. She does.
Tyson and I both only have boys, so
Yeah,
Oh, there you go. There you go.
yeah. And to be fair, my 6-year-old knew more about Taylor Swift during the Super Bowl than he knew about the Chiefs or anybody else playing. Well, I guess he didn't know about
Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce
Yeah, because of Taylor Swift. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
hockey playoffs about to start.
Hockey playoffs.
Saturday.
The Avs made it in. Unfortunately,
The Penguins didn't.
Penguins didn't.
They
but-
came up a couple points short after an amazing run to finish off the season. They have only themselves to blame for not making it. Other hockey news, and then we'll get into board games. The Arizona Coyotes are going to Utah.
That is, I'm very excited about that.
And rumor is that they might be called the Yetis.
I've heard the Blizzard.
I've heard the Blizzard. I've
Heard the Hockey Club.
the Golden Eagles to
No, they wouldn't do the Golden Eagles. Would they?
to honor the IHL team that was there for decades.
That's what, when I was growing up, it was the Golden Eagles.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that'd be kind of weird if they were the Golden Eagles, I think.
I told Shelly, I was like, man, we should buy season tickets.
I would love that as well. That'd be fun.
Or-
I mean, I love the Avs. The Avs are fantastic. I love
Yeah.
going to their games, but having a team in my hometown that I grew up in is
Yeah.
pretty awesome too.
Yeah.
And I don't think that whatever the team's called in Utah is going to replace Pittsburgh for you, right? But it would just be awesome.
The Avs are already my second team. What's another Western team to cheer for?
There
right?
you go. There you go.
Cool. Yeah. So board games. All
Board
right.
games. This is a board game podcast, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right. Let's start talking about board games. Should we jump into what we've been playing lately?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll get started. So I've been playing a game called Witchcraft. So Witchcraft with an exclamation
Oh,
point,
yeah,
right? Witchcraft. Witchcraft. This is kind of a follow-up to Resist!
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point. It's designed by Trevor Benjamin, Roger Tankersley, and David Thompson. It is a solo game. And as I've talked about before on the show, I'm not a big solo gamer. But I backed this Kickstarter because I'd played Resist and enjoyed it. And this theme actually appealed to me a little bit more than Resist.
I agree.
Yeah, so this is you're recruiting a coven of witches. The witches are actually, they're good witches. They're trying to do good things for the town that they live in, but they're trying to convince the town people that they are good witches by doing good things, right?
They're the banished witches from Septima.
There you go. Right. Hey, crossover.
I was thinking
who knew?
delivery service.
Sorry.
Who knew? So this is, I didn't mention who it's published by. It's published by Salt and Pepper Games. So really quick on how this works. So like I said, you're recruiting a coven of witches. To start the game, so there's 24 witches total. To start the game, you're going to draft the witches that you want in your coven deck. You'll have your coven deck, and then you'll have your recruit deck. So coven deck is the witches that you're going to use in the game. The recruit deck are witches that you can possibly recruit during the game. Okay, so you're going to do a little bit of a draft first. So there's villagers. You're trying to protect the villagers. There's multiple ways that you can lose the game. If there's lost souls, so if there's villagers that are lost, if you have a certain number of those, I think it's 5, you're going to lose the game. You're going to go on missions, and if you fail missions, if you fail 2 missions, then you're going to lose the game. If you have a certain number of curses, if the curse pile is gone, you lose the game. Or if as you draw cards, you only have a handful of curses, then you're going to lose the game. So as if with many games, there's many ways to lose, and then there's only one way that you're going to win. So there are jurors that you're trying to influence. And the way you win the game is you influence those jurors, and they have what's called a conviction deck. And at the end of the game, you flip over the conviction deck. And if you have enough influence where you've influence them to your side, you are going to have a better chance of winning. If you influence all of the jurors, then you are not guilty. You're innocent. You have a victory. If you influence 2 of the jurors, you're not guilty. So that's a little bit of a lesser win. It's a draw. You influence 1, you're guilty. It's a minor loss. And if you do terrible, evil reigns and it's a major loss. All right. So that's how you end up winning or losing the game. So on your turn, you're going to play witches from your hand. And what's cool is you have either a hidden or a revealed side of these cards. And when you play the card, if you play the hidden side, it means that you're going to get that witch back in the next round. But it's a little bit of a lesser action that you're taking. If you play the revealed side, it's going to be a little bit more of a powerful action, but you're going to lose that witch at the end of the round, and you won't be able to get it back. So there's that decision of, okay, do I need to get this better action now and lose that card for later, or take the lesser action and be able to get it later? What you're trying to do is when you play the cards, you will then select a mission. There are cards that you flip over that are challenge cards, and this represents things that you'll encounter on your way to the mission. And then there is a mission that you're trying to defeat, and there's a certain power level of that mission. So the witches that you play will have a number, and you add up all of those numbers and the witches you play. You have to defeat challenges, and then you try and defeat the mission. If you defeat the mission, you either get some kind of bonus. If you don't defeat the mission, you get a penalty, and then you have a certain number of influence points that you can spend on the jurors to try and influence them if you are successful in that mission. So at some point, you're going to want to go to trial. If you think you have enough influence for the jurors, you'll stop the round, you'll go to trial, you'll flip over those conviction cards, and you'll see if you have successfully swayed the jury. And if you do it well, then you win the game. If you don't, then you lose the game. So that's kind of the gist of how it plays. I know you've played it a few times, Tyler. What do you think of
this game,
Witchcraft?
it's brutal. I've only played twice. I've played Resist.
Yeah.
And I like this a lot more than Resist. It does some things differently. The end game is different in Resist. It's a range of points that determines how well you did based off of the missions that you completed. And this one, it's like if you got 0 jurors that you convinced, I don't remember the text, but you failed miserably.
Yeah.
1 is you lost, 2 is a draw, and if you get all 3, which I don't think is going to happen very often, you actually win.
Yeah.
I like that there's familiar cards in the
Those are awesome.
The deck that come out that you can buy or pay for with your mission points, and then have those to use to your advantage in later rounds.
Yeah, I had a witch that on the hidden side would give me a familiar, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So, and it was cool because I played it first. You play the witches in 2 different sections. So you can play witches, then you can choose a mission, and then you can play your remaining witches, right? So I held on to that card that let me take a familiar because I didn't know if that mission was going to have a familiar. I flipped over the cards. There was a familiar there. Then I played the witch. I took the familiar, and they give you powerful abilities, which is really cool and really fun. Yeah.
I like there's more variety in the cards, I think. And one of the things that I really like that is different from Resist. In Resist, the card actions on the cards that you're playing, you either play them during the plan or attack phase, and you still have the choice of hiding them or revealing them, but you have to, based on that card's actions or that character's actions, you can only play them at certain times. Whereas in Witchcraft, you can play them before you choose the mission that you're going after or after the mission you're going after. There's a little bit more flexibility there.
And there's some strategy on why you would do that as the game unfolds, which is cool.
Right. Yeah, it's great. My first game, I did really well. I randomly drew 12 witches to start with. And I did really well, and I thought I might have a chance of at least getting 2 jurors. And I ended up going to trial because I knew I was not going to survive another mission. And I failed all 3 jurors. Like they all had points higher than what I had accumulated. Yeah. And then the second time I played, I got just destroyed in the 4th or 5th round. I mean, it was a quick game. And that one I drafted for, so I need to work on my drafting skills.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun. I really look forward to going back to this one.
Yeah, the first time I played it, it was a struggle to get through. And as I was playing it, I'm like, man, I'm just not having any fun. This isn't a very good game. Then I got to the end, and I'm like, okay, I can see how I can influence this juror, and maybe I can get 2 of them, 2 out of the 3. And then it got exciting because towards the end, it becomes a push your luck game. You're like, okay, I don't think I can make it one more round. I'm just going to go for it. And flipping over those cards, those conviction cards, is exciting, right? Because you don't know if you're going to make it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that was cool. I'm excited to play again. And then I drafted the Sullivans. I wanted to make sure I could get all of the Sullivans. And then 2 Sullivans came up at the same time.
Which I'm like, compound off of each other.
Yeah, but when I was drafting, I got, okay, one goes into my Coven deck, and the other one had to go in the recruit deck because I got them at the same time when I was drafting. But then I noticed one of the cards on the Sullivan says you can dig for a Sullivan card in the recruit deck. So I'm like, that's cool. And I saw those synergies. And then I got 4 of them out at one time. It allowed me to get rid of one of the conviction cards on a juror. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to go to those missions as much because that conviction is going to be low. So I got to a point where I think I can do it. I flipped over, all those cards. I got to the very last card. I convinced 2 jurors, and I had 7 influence. I flipped over a 5. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I get a 2 or less, then I'm going to win, and get all of them. And I ended up flipping over a 4. But that moment was just so much fun, and it was cool. And I'm with you. It's a super tough game, but if you can get those synergies working with the cards, and if you can time it right, where you're putting those witches in jail instead of getting them in your Coven deck, it's a super satisfying experience, I think.
Yeah.
It's like any good game. There's tough decisions on what you're going to do, but when it works out, it's pretty fun.
It is kind of brutal because if you lose a mission, then that slot's gone.
Yes.
And then you only have 2 mission slots left.
Yes.
And if you lose again, then you're out. It's a battle of attrition. Basically, everything in the game ends the game against you if you let it go too far in that direction. If you have too many curses, if you lose two missions, if too many citizens die.
Like in this last game I played, the mission, so there's certain things in the mission. And one of them is if you don't select that mission, then a bad thing happens.
Yes.
Right? And the bad thing that happened was like if you have 3 or less curses in the curse pile, you lose immediately. And the turn before, I had put a curse card from my hand in the curse pile to make it 4 without knowing that was going to come up.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what? That was so lucky. It was like dumb luck that it happened, but it was kind of cool. Now I know that card's in there, so I can plan for it a little bit better, potentially, right? But
that card was part of my brutal loss.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, it contributed to it. I did like, based on the 3 jurors, those determine which challenge cards get added to the deck of base challenge cards.
Yep.
And it also determines which missions. So each time you pick a different juror, you're going to have a different set of missions, 3 missions for each juror. And that, I don't know.
It's good variability.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. There's like a little story type campaign thing that you can kind of play through.
Yep.
I haven't delved into that, but...
And there's certain witches that are only played in that campaign, which is more variability. And I'll probably be checking that out, because I think it'd be fun.
I'm not really a solo guy either. I mean, Tyson's our solo guy in this group by far, and I love playing this. And I think part of the fun is just building the deck at the beginning.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of the game, and it's fun to try to, like you said, find those synergies and get all the Sullivans or get all the Lilies, or because they compound off of each other.
Yeah. I've only played Resist. I haven't played Witchcraft, but I can hear a lot of the similarities and a lot of things I do like about Resist reflected in here. And then there are some things that you guys have mentioned that make it sound like it's improved upon almost. I also think the color palette in Witchcraft is far better. I like the color palette.
Yeah, and the art's
really good on both, but I like the color palette better on Witchcraft. But beyond that, it just sounds like you could actually probably own both and have unique enough experiences with both of them that there's value. Would you say that's true?
For me, I think just owning Witchcraft is fine. I don't own Resist because I connect more with the theme here in Witchcraft. I think there's some differences in the mechanics that, if you really like this type of game, it could warrant owning both.
If you don't have either, I would say go get Witchcraft.
I completely agree with that. Yeah. Just the whole juror mechanic, I think, is really interesting, and it's done really well. And that's not in Resist from what I remember, So I think Resist, but if you're super jazzed up about solo games,
I think
then you probably could get both.
Witchcraft.
Oh, Witchcraft. Yes. Yeah. Witchcraft. But if you really like these solo games, then you wouldn't go wrong getting both. So that is Witchcraft.
All right. So I'm going to talk about a 2-player game that is also challenging. This is Sail. It came out in 2023. Got sent to us from Allplay. It's designed by Akiyama Koryo and Kozo Yusei. It re-implements Hamelin Cave, which I had never heard of, but came out a couple years ago, maybe overseas. And this is a beautiful little game from Allplay. And true to Allplay, there is little dinky instructions, very compact and to the point, and fantastic. It is a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game. How does that work, you say? Well, you did say that, right?
I
in your mind,
I
you were
heard myself
thinking
saying it. Yes.
Definitely.
Uh-huh.
So basically, in this game, you're trying to get your ship from one side of the ocean or sea to the other. And in the way, on this board that is made up of interconnected rhombuses, or rhombi, is a bunch of kraken and islands, and you're trying to navigate the seas. There are storms in a couple places on the board, and you have to pass those locations by a certain round, otherwise you lose. If you take too much damage from krakens, you lose. If you get your ship to the other side successfully to the destination, then you win. But you have to do that in 5 rounds or less, otherwise you also lose. There are 3 suits of 9 cards, and the cards have different symbols on them. And you start out with the 1s and 2s in the Kraken deck, and you don't have access to those yet. So you have 3 through 9s. You deal 9 cards out to each player. Then you're gonna start playing tricks, and whoever wins the trick's going to advance their cube on the tricks 1 track. When someone gets to 4 wins, the round ends and you'll start a new round, but you'll also take lots of kraken damage at the end of the round. So it's a battle of attrition. Again, you're trying to get to the other side of the ocean and survive the kraken attacks. But on each of the cards that you play, there are different symbols. There's wheel symbols. There's a wheel with a kraken tentacle and a cannon, and there's mermaids. And so different combos will happen when you play each trick. So, for instance, if one player plays a card with a wheel and the other player plays a card with a wheel, then you're going to advance your ship, and it's going to move either up or down on the rhombi track across the ocean in the direction of whoever won the trick. So you're trying to navigate it. Oh, hey, there's a kraken right there up and to the right of us. So I'm gonna try and win. So we go down and to the right around the kraken, right? If you guys, it's hard to do, but if you can both play a mermaid card, then you move advance straight, and that kind of lets you skip a column of rhombi. So there's some interesting things going on. At the end of every round, you're taking hits from the kraken, and if the kraken deck runs out and the kraken card is the only card in that deck, then you automatically lose. That could happen in the middle of a round or at the end of a round. The more times the kraken attacks, the more damage it will do each subsequent time that it attacks. There are ways to reseed that deck with cards. If you play a cannon at the same time that you're teammate plays a wheel with a Kraken symbol. So different symbols going on the cards. You're trying to win tricks, but not too many, because if you win 4, then the round ends. If either player does that, the round ends. You each have a pirate to start out with that has a special ability. The game is beautiful. I love the style. I love the art, which was done by Weberson Santiago,
who is done some really great artwork. Russian World Championship, Russian Roulette, Bloody Inn. He did Coup. He did Whirling Witchcraft, The Great Split. All those.
Yeah,
it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The art in this one's fantastic.
The meeples on this, gorgeous.
Yes, and the screen printed ones I think are upgrades. That's an upgrade pack. It's beautiful. We played again recently, Logan and I. So we had done like the intro scenario. That was pretty easy and we won, but it was a rough first play. We played again at the first scenario, and so they have 5 scenarios, and each time you have to go further and further. And the 5th scenario, you have to go all the way across the board. I don't know how you possibly do that. I mean,
but if you do,
it would be amazing.
It'd be awesome.
So we played again, and the first game of the first scenario, we came up like 3 spaces short, and it was brutal. The second game, it came down to the last trick, and we won, and it was awesome. So excited to explore the other scenarios. This game is fantastic. Really simple to play. I still feel like there's a lot of nuances and strategy to figure out with it in future plays. But it's awesome. I really enjoy it.
I'm a big fan of co-ops, so a 2-player co-op. I played co-ops 2-player, but one that's specifically made and designed for 2 players. I don't think I've ever played one like that.
Well, and a trick-taking one, too.
Right. That just doesn't make sense in my brain.
Yeah, right.
It sounds like it plays well and is fun and exciting. So, I'd definitely be interested in checking this one out.
Cool. Yeah. No, I really enjoy it. It is a different environment. 2-player trick-taking cooperative game. I haven't seen that before.
Who's designing those? Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
I feel like we've been doing a lot of co-op talk in this episode, so I have to get away from that a little bit here. I got to move into a competitive style game because we're going to dive more into co-op later in this episode. So the game that I've been playing lately is Tikal. If you'll recall, this was on my shelf of shame list, so
no longer.
I got it off my shelf. I've played it, and well, first things first. Tikal is designed by Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer. It was published, or at least the copy I have was published by Rio Grande Games. There's another implementation of it, the Super Meeple version of the game that has a lot better components and is probably the desired version to get of this. But this was a Spiel des Jahres winner in 1999. This game has been around for a while.
It has.
And I think that at first, when we started playing this, because we started playing this on BGA, and on BGA, we started playing it and didn't have a real good grasp of it. And as I was playing through it on BGA, I got this worry that I wasn't going to want to get it off the shelf and play it because I worried that 1999, does the mechanics hold up? Is this kind of an antiquated design? And after having played it on the table, I'm pleased to have this in my collection because I think it does hold up still. I think that even though this was an older design, it was well worth the design. It's a very simplistic design. On multiple occasions when we were playing it, Tyler, you mentioned that you kind of felt like it was a Reiner Knizia style design where it was simple rules overhead, but a lot of meaty decisions to make, right? I think you're exactly right. And like for me, so the way the game generally works is Tikal is you are trying to excavate the Mayan ruins. And as such, you're going through the jungle and discovering new areas. So the game has a board that has a bunch of hexagon tile spots on it. And you have hexagon tiles. So it's a tile placement area control and action selection style game. So every turn, whoever's turn it is going to draw a tile, and on the tile it's going to have a couple of different terrain things, and they're going to put it on the board. And now for their turn, they're going to have 10 action points that they can spend to do various different things. They can place workers on the board to go and excavate further temples. They can move. They can establish tents. They can discover artifacts. They can go through and excavate the ruins a little bit further so that they get taller and taller. And each of these ruins on them are going to have a point value. So it starts with 1, and the further you excavate, the taller your temple gets, all the way up to 9 potential points.
It never even crossed my mind that we were excavating. I thought we were building new temples.
No. We are archaeologists. This is excavation.
So the theme really comes through, is what you're saying.
I mean, my version is just little cardboard chits that put it in, but the Super Meeple version has these like temple kind of tokens that grow in size, and it does feel like it gets bigger and it looks better. I would love that version because I think it would add to that kind of experience. But as you're excavating this, the point value of those temples become higher and higher. Each player is trying to control or have the most workers on a temple so that during subsequent scoring rounds, they'll get a lot of points. So every round, somebody's going to place a tile, going to do 10 actions, and then the next player is going to take their turn. It goes usually relatively quick until somebody draws a volcano tile. The volcano tile, there are 4 of them. Well, there's 3, kind of 4. One's already printed on the board. But there are 4 rounds of scoring. So when somebody draws a volcano tile, essentially what happens is a scoring round is triggered, meaning that the player who draws it gets to do their 10 action points, and then they score however many points they control. So on the board, you can get points from either controlling temples or for having sets of artifacts. If you have 1 unique artifact, it's worth 1 point. If you have a pair of them, it's 3 points, and if you have 3 of them, it's worth 6 points. So you're trying to maximize your scoring potential during these scoring rounds, and then everybody gets a chance to go and do their 10 actions and score during that round. So you go through the whole game until the entire board is filled up with hexagons, and then you go through one final scoring round, and the player with the most points wins. It was relatively quick and easy to kind of get played, and I was surprised at the meaty decisions that I was making. There are on the hexagon tiles little stone icons that designate paths between tiles, and depending on where you place them, they may make it harder or easier for you to get to certain places. So you're trying to strategically put these tiles in places that your opponents aren't going to like as much, but are going to make for better paths for you to get to. There's a lot of things in here, I think, to like, and I can see why this one won the spiel.
Yeah, absolutely, especially back in 1999.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoyed the play. I enjoyed the play on BGA. By the end of it, I think I had about 85% understanding. But we played this in about an hour.
Yeah.
And I had a really good time with it. Just the decisions were fun. It was fun as a 2-player, too. I tried to stay in your area that you were kind of developing as much as possible. There was one side of the board that was pretty much all mine. There wasn't a lot out there. I excavated a lot of the artifacts, and there was only a couple pyramids out there. But it was fun to see how the map built out, and Tyson drew the first volcano, and of course he places it in a way that kind of blocked me off from connecting more to his area. I waited till near the end of the game to put out my second tent, and was able to steal some points from moving guys in the right spot in those last couple turns.
And you could set guardians on certain temples. So about midway through the game, I took 2 of the highest scoring temples and put guardians on them, and it blocked you out of a lot of points during that next scoring round.
It did, yeah.
But because you had that other side of the board where you were able to get to, it made it like, it was interesting, that trade-off of because when you put a guardian, you have to sacrifice any other meeples that you have in that area, and they come off the board.
Which played to my advantage in that last round. I was able to eke out some extra points because I had more guys on the board still.
Yep.
No, I really liked it. I'd go back to it, and now having played it on the table, I would definitely play more games with this on Board Game Arena.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I've only played it on BGA, and I put play in air quotes because I didn't understand the rules fully. But you guys were playing it when I got here tonight, and I think I understand the rules a little bit better. And it looked like it was a lot of fun. So I'm excited to maybe get another game going on BGA and see how it goes.
And there's an auction variant too, I hear.
Yes.
So that'd be fun to try too, especially if that's available on BGA.
I think it is, but I have to double check. But yeah, essentially what the auction does is it allows you to pre-plan which tiles you want, but you have to spend victory points as your expense to be able to get it. And you can wager as much of victory points as you want, but everybody starts the game with 20 victory points, and then you're choosing, do I spend my victory points or do I hold on to the victory points?
I think I'd rather just play vanilla on Board Game Arena. That might be more fun to do at the table because otherwise I could see that game taking forever on Board Game Arena. I totally agree. So,
but I want to go back to one thing you did say, Tyler, that the 2-player experience was really good. And one thing that I don't think I've seen done as well even since as Tikal does it is there is no scaling, like player scaling in the setup for a 2-player or a 4-player game.
Yeah, which was nice.
It's identical setup. You don't have to take tiles out. You don't have to count things out. It's identical. And you don't often see that kind of scaling work well in a game that can work well at a 2-player game and a 4-player game.
I actually wondered about that before you came over because I think you were thinking, and I had mentioned that Logan could play with us. Well, I forgot Logan had a night class tonight. And so I was like, oh, is that going to change the rules and the setup for a 2-player? But that's not the case, and that's pretty cool. So
yeah. But yeah, that's Tikal.
Nice. So I played a game recently. We've been playing on BGA, but I also got it to the table. That is Trekking the World. This is by Underdog Games, designed by Charlie Bink. There are a number of artists that are credited to this design. Recently in an episode, I talked about trekking through history, also an Underdog design. There's also Trekking the National Parks, which I haven't played yet, but I'm very interested in playing that one. This is in the trekking series of games, right? So the way this one works is you have a map of the world, and you place a bunch of these souvenir cubes out on different cities in the world, okay? There are region bonus tokens that you put out onto the board. There are destination cards that represent all of these destinations that you can go to. And just, in Underdog fashion, on the back of all of these destination cards, you can read a little blurb about the where you're going and where you're trekking to. So it's a little bit of an educational experience too, if you take the time to read those. And then you have trek cards, and the trek cards are how you're going to get around the map. And they're in various colors. There's green, blue, yellow, and red trek cards. And these trek cards have a number on them from 1 to 3. So the way the game works is you get a number of trek cards to start the game. You start in an airport somewhere on the board that another player already isn't occupying, and then you start the game. The game is super simple. First, you have to move. You take one of the trek cards in your hand. You can do multiple, and you're going to move a number of spaces on the board to a destination that you want to go to. The destination that you land, if it has a souvenir cube, you're going to take that souvenir cube, put it into your suitcase, and then you have an option. You can choose to do 3 things. You can draw 2 cards, so you get more trek cards for future turns. You can take a tour. So if you take a tour in the location that you are at, if that location card is one of the 4 that are revealed, you can discard these trek cards to take a tour of that location. And when you do it, you take that card and it goes in front of you. There's a point value. You get those points at the end of the game. If it's in a certain spot on that row, you can get bonus points, either 5 bonus points or 3 bonus points. It's just more points at the end of the game. Or you can do a journey. And this is cool. There's 2 different journey cards that get revealed during the game. And the journey cards, they will let you break the rules in one of 2 ways, right? You have to discard 2 of the same color of cards, and then you can do that ability. So those are the 3 things that you can do on your turn. So the whole game, you're moving around the board, you're collecting souvenirs. If you collect 2 of one souvenir, you get this bonus point little tile at the end of the game. If somebody gets more souvenirs throughout the game, they take that from you. So it's a back and forth between the players on who gets those bonus points. If you take all of the cubes out of one region, then you get this other tile. If you do it first, you get this tile that gives you bonus points at the end of the game.
I missed that one.
Yeah. So if you do that, that's another way you get points. As you collect these souvenirs, if you complete columns, then you're going to get points based on the most completed column that you get. So there's a bunch of ways to score. This game is a lot of fun. I like it a lot. It gives me, Ticket to Ride vibes for sure. It's probably about that weight of game. It's more of a family weight game. But as it gets towards the end of the game, I feel that same tension that I do in Ticket to Ride.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because, the game ends immediately on somebody's turn when they get their 5th destination. Or the game ends when these tokens for, taking all the cubes out of a region. If I think there's 6 of them, if 5 of the 6 get taken, the game ends immediately. So you're looking around the board saying, oh, wow, if this person goes over here, they could trigger the end of the game. Do they have the colored cards that they need? I can see that they're going over to this location. Do they have the cards that they need in order to get there? And then to take a tour of that to end the game. So there's that tension there, which I think is really cool. And there's some fun strategy. It's interesting because you have to move first. That's the first thing you have to do. So you have to look at your cards and set yourself up to get to where you need to go. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If somebody's in your way, you can't go through them, which is another thing. So you can block somebody off if you know that they're going somewhere. You can kind of block them off from that area if you're in the same area that they are. And then the fact that you can go from airport to airport and get around the map very quickly, then you can kind of surprise people that they don't know you're going to that spot, which is kind of a cool dynamic to the game too. So, I think Underdog Games does a great job with family weight games, and this is just another one in that trekking series that I think they do a really good job with.
Oh, I've really been enjoying this one. Like I've thought it was really quick and simple to pick up, but you can see the depth of strategy in it, and there's a lot of interesting choices to make. You mentioned that it reminded you of Ticket to Ride. That was one of the first things that I thought with the game is too, as I was playing it. I was like, this reminds me exactly of Ticket to Ride. The tension that's in there, like I still get those feelings of tension. But one thing that I like that it does differently than Ticket to Ride, where in Ticket to Ride you have your routes that are secret to you. You're holding on to those, right? Mm-hmm. These are global ones that you can you're competing for, and you can kind of see when somebody might be going towards it. And so you have to think, can I make it there fast enough, or should I pivot and go to different ways in a way that it reminds me of Century Spice Road a little bit, right? And playing like what am I collecting for to get to the spot that I need to get to?
Well, and are they going to take their 4th gold cube and steal that gold tile scoring from me? I don't know.
The souvenir,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's cool, too. There might be something you really want to do on your turn, but you might not have the cards that allow you to move that exact number of spaces. And so you're setting yourself up from turn to turn for future turns, right?
Yeah. And there's these routes that you can take, it connects to the other side of the board. So I was playing last night with my wife and she was convinced that I was going to go to a certain location. But it was the same. I couldn't get the cards that I needed to get there. But I noticed that, okay, I can go across the board to this other side because I have those cards and I have the numbers to get there. So I just jumped over to the other side. She's like, wow, why are you going over there? I'm like, well, I'm getting that one, So you have to pivot and You have the opportunity to surprise your opponent by doing unexpected things.
But I also like that you can do that in multiple spots with the airports, right?
Yep.
Like the airports can get you to different spots quicker that may be able to solve that problem for you in a way that your opponents may or may not be expecting as much.
Yeah, and it hurts a little bit to go to an airport because you don't get a souvenir. There's no souvenirs at the airport,
Right?
Which is weird.
Yeah.
Because there are always
That's where you
souvenirs
buy
at
them
the airport.
usually, right?
As I said that out loud, I'm like, that's not very thematic. But
in Tikal, you didn't have to be on the spot that you build a tent on, which
Yeah,
breaks
that
down a little thematically.
yeah,
too.
well, there you go.
Yeah, but you
Okay,
also didn't know we were excavating, so we're not going to critique the theme.
Yeah, well, I thought I had played something wrong because I didn't have a guy when I put my first tent out on that tile, and then we found out, oh, you don't have to. So
Oh,
anyway, back
well,
to
there you go.
Which one do you like more, Trekking the World or Trekking Through History?
Good question. Trekking the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounded like it.
And it's interesting because Trekking Through History is the higher rated game on Board Game Geek. It seems like people like that one a little bit more generally, but I like this one more. I like the board itself, and I like being able to look at the board and plan out where I'm going to go. Trekking Through History was fun. I like that one a lot, but I think this one, for me, is just a little bit better. And that's why I'm really interested in trekking the national parks, because it has the board, and you're moving around that board as well. And I don't know how similar it is in the mechanics, but I definitely want to check that one out too. So it's good. I like it a lot. That's Trekking the World.
I'm excited to play it more on BGA.
Yeah.
Sure.
We need to keep games going. We're close to finishing one right now.
Yes, we are. I think it's very close as well.
So one more game that I'm going to talk about. This was a Kickstarter that I backed, Stonespine Architects from Thunderworks Games. And the designer of this is Jordy Aiden, who also designed Cartographers. And I believe he designed a game that I talked about a year ago, maybe, Zombicide Gear Up, a cooperative Zombicide spin-off from CMON. And so Stonespine Architects, not all of Thunderworks games are in the world of Ulos, but this one happens to be in the same world with Dawn of Ulos and Role Player and Cartographers and Lockup. They've got quite the little mini-verse going, which is fantastic. I love the art. I love the production on this. Thunderworks Games does a great job. So Stonespine Architects, you are drafting cards. Everybody starts out with a hand of 5 cards, and you're going to draft a card to add to your dungeon. You're building a dungeon. You're designing a dungeon. And it's going to be, when you're all done, you're going to have 4 rows of 4 cards. And that's your dungeon. And then you're going to score the dungeon at the end. So you're trying to be the best dungeon designer in this game. So you're going to have how each round plays, and there's only 4 rounds of this game. So each round, every player will have a hand of 5 cards, and you're going to draft a card and add it to your dungeon. And those are chamber cards. And then you're going to pass your hand to the next player, and you're going to get a new hand of 4 cards, and then you're going to add another card to your dungeon until you've got 4 for that round. Okay. On the chamber cards, there are going to be monsters. There's going to be traps, treasure chests, reputation stars, which is the victory points, and that same icon symbol that's in all of Thunderworks games. And there's 4 spots on each chamber card, because you might be able to buy symbols or tokens later on and add them to your dungeon. There's a blueprint card that each player is going to start out with, and it will have a 4x4 grid, and on each row, it'll have 2 things that you need to build in certain spots to score points from those. So like on your first row, you might need a ooze monster in one room, and you might need a trap on another tile on that row. So if you can match those over the course of the game, you're going to score up to 20 points at the end of the game for that. So after everybody has created their first row of cards at the end of the first round, you count up how much gold you earned from each card. Each card has a number of gold on it at the bottom of the card. So You're going to go up on the gold track for how much gold you got. Whoever has the most gets to buy from the market first. And there's going to be different things available: traps, monsters, secret passages, things that you can add to your dungeon to score more points. Okay. It's one of those games, it's like Nova Luna, kind of, in reverse. If you're the furthest behind, you get to draft multiple times in a row, right? Yeah. And so in this one, it's reverse. If you still have the most gold after you go to the market once, you get to go again and buy something else before the next highest player gets to go. So as you spend gold, you go down on the gold track. Or you can choose to pass and not spend your gold, or maybe after you've bought once at the market and then you choose the next time to pass, you can buy a challenge card. And these are going to be score multipliers for certain things at the end of the game. And so sometimes you might want to pass up spending your gold because you get first choice of the challenge cards, and you might have something that gives you tons of points for the most kobolds or the most unique traps, and that just might fit really well for you. So there's a little bit of a drafting element there. And then the round ends after everybody's spent all their gold and or passed. And then you start a new round, draw 5 cards. You're passing them in the opposite direction this time. It's really quick game. 45 minutes. You're playing 4 rounds. At the end of the game, you're going to score everything, your challenge cards, how well you did on your blueprint. There's a global goal card, and whoever finishes with the highest priority for having the most gold when you pass in the last round. So it kind of has a little bit of a solitaire-ish feel to it, at least the first play. So I played once just two-handed to learn the game. There is a solo version. I haven't played that yet, but I really want to try it out because I think it looks pretty good. And then I played a 4-player game, and there wasn't a lot of talking during the game. You're drafting a card and you're passing your hand and putting it in your dungeon, and that goes pretty quick. It's a couple minutes, and then you're back to the market phase where you're spending your gold and then passing and picking your challenge. Interesting decisions on when do I stop spending my gold, what really benefits me anymore, and hey, there's a challenge card that I really want, and I'm going to draft that before Mark passes or before someone else passes, right? I see this game as if I got more plays of it. The first time you play Azul, you're drafting those tiles out of the center. You're not really looking at other people's boards, right? Mm-hmm. I think as you got more plays of Stonespine Architects, you'd start, okay, I've got 3 cards in my hand. I'm going to draft 1, pass 2. Which 2 are going to help out, Tyson the least?
Hate drafting.
Yeah. So I can see that coming into play a little bit more, but still it's not a game, and maybe it's different based on the group, but the 4-player game that we played, there wasn't a lot of talking going on while we were drafting those cards. There was more during the market phase and more interesting decisions going on there that were, talked about and stuff. So I really like this. I really want to try the solo version of it. It's relaxing to play for me. So
it looks like one of those kinds of games where when you're done and you've completed it, you've got something that you can be proud of. It's kind of this little artwork kind of thing that you've put together.
Yeah, it's fun to
be like, oh, look, this is my dungeon that I've created, right?
Right. Well, and something I didn't mention, your blueprint card also has where your entrance is and your exit, and you can score more points for every card that's connected to both of those. And if they connect to each other, then you're doubling that. So I like that it's quick to play. 45, 50 minutes, whether you have 2 players or 5 players, I think it'll go pretty quick. So,
yeah, that's what I noticed about it is the play time, right? If you can get a good meaty experience in an hour or less, then that's great.
Yeah. So I'm excited about this one. Like I said, I think Thunderworks Games does an amazing job. I have everything except for Lockup and Role Player Adventures in this Ulos world, and every single one of them I have enjoyed.
I was just going to say, well, that sounds like it fits right into the role player universe. Like a lot of the scoring objectives and what you're trying to do, laying it out, having the grid pattern, feels like it fits in the universe.
Yeah.
Both mechanically and thematically.
Well, and I love that they use the same icon, the same symbol for victory points across all the games. And there's, the art's very similar too. And they've just done a really good job with this. So I thought it was cool that the designer of this also did cartographers. And I can totally see that. They're, you're trying to draw the best map. And then this one, you're trying to create the best dungeon. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. I'd love to try this one for sure. Even solo, because that solo sounds exciting too. But yeah.
That is Stonespine Architects. That wraps up what we've been playing lately, or at least that we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to go ahead and jump into an interview with Matt Leacock, the designer of Daybreak, the game that we're featuring in this episode. Welcome to our interview with designer Matt Leacock. If you've been living under a rock or in a forbidden desert, he is an amazing board game designer most widely known in the board gaming community for Pandemic. But he has designed many other games. When I think of modern cooperative game designers, Matt Leacock is at the top of that list. We are so happy he could join us. Thank you, Matt, for making the time to speak with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'll just start off really quick, just personal experience. And I think Kevin had a similar experience. He actually told me about Pandemic Legacy. I had played Pandemic, and it's been years ago now, but I still remember sitting around with my family, sitting down to play Pandemic Legacy Season 1. And that is one of my most memorable experiences as a gamer. Just, exploring the campaign as it happened and tearing up cards and exploring just all the new rules and opening boxes. That was just such a novel thing to me. And that was so awesome. And then the second thing I wanted to mention, my wife's not a big gamer, but she loves cooperative games. And that started with Pandemic and all the iterations of Pandemic. So I think we've got just about everything.
That's great.
And so she was nerding out, you get to talk to Matt Leacock. That's awesome. So just thank you and appreciate all those awesome experiences that you gave our family. It's been fantastic. Generally, when we interview game designers, we like to start off with some generic questions. How did you get into board games as a player and then as a designer? I know you had a career as a UI UX designer and then slowly transitioned to a full-time board game designer. How did you get started with board games?
I've been playing them since I was little. That was always my favorite birthday present when I was a kid, getting games. And I just started tinkering them, I think, when I was also a kid. I got serious about trying to design them when I was a teenager. Meaning I made a lot of really bad games, but it was just like this itch that I always had to scratch. I think I was fascinated by systems and wanted to see if I could make my own. And so often I would draw on the back of other board games, try to make them better or see what made them tick. And my goal really was just to see if I could get one published someday. Someday maybe I'll get something published and I ended up doing that myself. I just printed 200 copies of a game that I put together off the office printer, essentially, and in Kinko's boxes. I brought that to Germany and sold it.
Oh, awesome!
And that did not go real well. I will say. I mean, the game was fairly well received. I could never do that now. The quality was so low that people would just laugh at me. But I met a lot of really good people. A lot of folks who welcomed me into the hobby and made some connections, and then they kind of paved the way for Pandemic, which happened 8 years later, and that's what really brought me into into game design as a career.
What was the name of that first game that you designed?
It was a car racing game called Lunatic's Loop.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I saw that there was a Borderlands in 1995, and I wondered if that was your first
That is actually that came before Lunatic's Loop. I had a real hard time selling that. I had no idea what to do. I just wanted to make something really. So I made 120 of those. And I was working at a company that produced spray paint in the Midwest at the time. And I was in their pre-press group. And it was just really easy to get printing done. So I made a bunch of those.
Oh, nice.
But I just sold them at a local hobby store. I don't know, maybe sold a dozen of them. I still got a couple in the attic.
Oh, that's awesome. So as you were starting out, were there any designs of games or any designers that influenced you when you were getting going?
Yeah, I think like early influences, played some Avalon Hill games with my dad. I could think of playing like Acquire was big, so Sid Saxon. I played some war games I didn't like very much, which led me to try my hand at doing some fantasy war games of my own. But the big one, I think, was Civilization, Avalon Hill Civilization, playing that and just being blown away by all the interlocking mechanisms and going like, wow, this is amazing, and wanting to kind of like do that. I want to do that, you know.
Right. You just made
awesome.
made Tyler's day by mentioning Acquire.
I grew up playing Acquire from as young as I can remember. So anytime anybody else mentions Acquire, I'm just like,
yeah, I've got like three editions here, and I think I've laser cut a couple of my own wooden sets.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun.
I was playing with a roll and write version. I played with my brother and my son the other day. I gave it a spin, and it needs some adjustments, but I like to tinker every once in a while. So, and I guess actually, you know, as someone who started out in a different career and then switched over full time to board game design, what advice would you have for aspiring game designers that are maybe doing something else?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I would say first of all, it's really tough to make a living at it. It's good to do it as a side hobby or side gig for a while. That's what I did. You start small, I think, is probably a good idea. It helps to kind of like hack other people's games and get your feet wet with that, rather than trying to like design a big Dune Imperium game as your first way out. I think like one tip I tend to give is just to try to keep the prototypes pretty rough early on, so you can change them quickly. And try to get them on the table as soon as you can, because you can spend like a month in a journal, and then as soon as it hits the table, you'll realize that all that work just really accounts for nothing if it doesn't work right away, and often it doesn't work right away. Yeah, so those are, and you know, like a lot of it is about empathy and watching people and observing behavior and being humble about things. Like you might think you know what the right answer is, but then you watch other people and maybe it just doesn't work at all, and you have to you know, be willing to accept that and iterate.
So it sounds like you need a good playtest group, right?
It helps. It also helps to go wider. There can be dangers of testing with the same people over and over again, especially if it's your friends and family, because it's less objective. Yeah. So if you can pull yourself out of the room, that's even better, and test with people you don't know. Ultimately, that's great.
Right. So many of your designs are co-op games, right? So what kind of led you into the co-op design space?
So I didn't think cooperative games would be fun. First of all, when I in my mind, I thought that was something that you taught kids how to share. Let's all sit down.
Hey, look, everybody wins.
Play this cooperative game. Yeah, eat your broccoli, that kind of thing. But I played Knizia's Lord of the Rings, and that quickly changed my mind. I was really impressed at how that really drew people in, and I found that playing with my family, we all had a good time. Even if we lost together. And I've just discovered all sorts of advantages since then. But that was the big thing. I think it was like some of the feelings it engendered was one, like as a player. And then as a designer, I love the challenge of trying to come up with an opponent for a bunch of players, because it's basically like systems design. How can I make an antagonist that'll keep 4 adult minds occupied for an hour? That's a nice, using cardboard. It's an interesting, fun challenge. So, that's what drew me to that format. And then Pandemic came about as like trying to take that idea and like what would be a good enemy. And at the time, SARS was in the news, and I thought, oh yeah, diseases would be really interesting, because they've got all these emergent behaviors that I could try to model with cards.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic came, the actual pandemic, which
Yeah, how about that? Yeah.
which was interesting, right? Did you see like increased sales of the game because of that? I've kind of often thought.
Yeah, it was an interesting arc. So yeah, really tons of media coverage
Yeah.
early on, very topical. So a lot of people brought their sets out early on. And you're under lockdown. What are you going to do? So a lot of people turned to games. Board games as a category really did very well during lockdown. But then reality sets in. You're like, well, I would like a little escape. Maybe this is not the right game for that. So yeah, there's a bit of a boom and then definitely a leveling off afterward.
I was just going to say that's when you bust out the Fallen Rome version and you got a different theme going on, but the same great system. So
yeah, totally. We're really happy that we kind of turned the pandemic system into an ingredient brand. So it's like there's this underlying system. It has nothing to do with disease, but we had planned to do that before the pandemic hit, by the way, because a lot of people were just confused. Like, pandemic, fall of Rome, what are you trying to say? The barbarians are diseases? It caused legitimate confusion for people, and there were so many products. It allowed us to go like, okay, well, the pandemic stuff deals with disease, and the other stuff is not. So yeah, that was good.
Yeah. It's funny. I would joke around with people. You mentioned that board games got more popular during the pandemic because, what else were you going to do? And I would say, I've been preparing for this for like 12, 13 years. I got a whole basement full of board games that I can play during the pandemic, which
you were a prepper, man.
Yeah, I was a prepper. I didn't even know it. Right. So that was funny. So like a lot of people are drawn to co-ops, right? You mentioned that, everybody I think likes to play a co-op and share in that victory. What else do you think draws people to that style of game?
Well, it's one of the things I like about the style of games that I've been working on in this space is it's like collaborative problem solving. So you get to be creative with your friends and just spitball ideas together. And it's something you do in real life, but this gives you a place to exercise that. And you're doing it in real time across a table. You're not in Zoom. These days especially, it's this chance to connect, make eye contact, communicate, exercise all these different social skills in kind of a fun, challenging environment. So I think that's what I really like about it. And I think other people enjoy that chance to connect with people. And you can contrast that with like playing a competitive version of like a Euro game where you're trying to do like action efficiency or something like that, where it's very intense and very quiet and you're running all sorts of numbers. It's a totally different set of it's legitimately fun for people, but it's a different kind of fun. So I think this collaborative problem solving in real time with your friends is definitely a style that I enjoy.
Yeah, I remember when Pandemic first came out, my wife and I playing, and we would play and lose. And then we would say immediately, we got to play again to see what we can do better. And then we would win. And we're like, okay, we got to throw in another epidemic card to see if we can, take it up a notch and see if we can win the next level. And it was just over and over again. We would play. And that puzzle that we were trying to figure out was just so enjoyable. And I think that's, part of that cooperative experience is figuring out that puzzle. And like you said, shared around a table together, which is just a fun experience. So it's great.
Yeah, I mean, my job is really trying to get people into that zone where it's just challenging enough, right? I mean, when the game first came out, I remember that a lot of people thought it was impossible to win.
Right.
And I think that like the folks in the hobby have just collectively gotten better at cooperative games in the meantime. Yeah. So it's challenging now. Like coming up with a new cooperative title, you have to write in, hey, if you've never played one of these before, set it at this level. If you've played a bunch of them, try this level.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about doing a new game, do you prefer to do cooperative games?
Yeah, the opportunities for new projects come from all over the place, and I kind of look at them on what merits they bring, and what I'm really lucky in that I'm able to select the projects that I'm going to work on, and so it's just one ingredient in consideration. So I've been working on a number of competitive games. They just have different characteristics, but some of them are really fun. So it's not like I only want to work on co-ops. I mean, working on Ticket to Ride Legacy was just a blast with Rob and Alan, and scratched a whole different set of itches. So I enjoy them both. I think I'm more comfortable perhaps in the cooperative space because I've done more. Mm-hmm. But I certainly don't want to limit myself to that.
Ticket to Ride Legacy. We are on game 4 of Ticket to Ride Legacy, and absolutely loving it. So we're based out of Colorado. I'm playing with some family in Utah. So we can only play when we get together every few months, and it's killing me that I have to wait until our summer vacation to finish it up. But we've really been enjoying that one. It's been a great experience for us so far.
Oh, very good.
So you mentioned Legacy, Ticket to Ride Legacy, Pandemic Legacy. Tyler referenced that to start off, and we've just had great experiences with that game. What were some of the challenges that you faced creating a legendary or a legacy version of a game?
Yeah, I think for Rob and I, so Rob did Risk Legacy and Seafall prior to that, so he had more experience than I did at the time. But the format was relatively new, I would think, and so part of the challenge was trying to figure out the structure and the kind of like we call it the spine, how to knit together all the different games. And so it took a little while to kind of figure that out, how to get the game to adjust to the player's level of skill. So trying to figure out how we could put in negative feedback loops. So if you're doing really poorly, how to adjust that, find those systems. And then it was just an active discovery, really. Like, how can we design a game so that you really want to play the next one? And learning from what screenwriters do when they're writing screenplays, like act breaks and like emotional journeys. And I did a little bit of a deep dive into like story and what makes stories tick. And a lot of this comes more naturally to Rob. So some of this, I would be explaining these new techniques, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I got it." But yeah, it was fun to work on all this with him and just kind of like learn this stuff and see what works. And it was really all about. I mean, it was it's part art, part science. So we tried these experiments out, put them in front of people, and sometimes we just hit gold. You see this big emotional reaction on film because we're recording this. We can't sit with people for 12, 16 hours as they're playing this whole thing. So we ask them to record themselves. And so it was, a big dose of ethnography in there as well.
Yeah.
So the subsequent ones were season 2 and season 0 were both harder and easier. I mean, they were easier because we had kind of the structure figured out, but then we also didn't want to, repeat ourselves. So trying to find new story elements and new mechanisms was harder, but the whole thing was just a blast.
Yeah, the legacy games have kind of taken off since Pandemic Legacy Season 1, but I still vividly remember the first time I tore a card in half, and it was it pained my soul because I take such good care of my games. It's like, I'm doing what? Or I'm putting a sticker here. It was a mind-blowing experience at that time. A little bit more commonplace now, but that was it was an experience for sure that first time. So it was fun.
I'm curious, there's filmmakers and other artists and creators that create things and then never actually go back and rewatch or revisit what they created. Do you go back and play your games? And if so, which one's your favorite to play?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that. I very rarely play them because I've played them to death during development or tested them, right? In the case of the legacy games, I have not played them. I just have not played any of the Pandemic Legacy games. So I'm thinking like in 5 years or something, it'd be fun to sit down and maybe some of it will be new to me because I'll have forgotten.
Yeah. That's funny.
The Ticket to Ride Legacy stuff, though, I have been playing. I'm in the second campaign now, and part of it is I think it's because it's a competitive game, and I just haven't like internalized the systems to death. That I've just been enjoying that tremendously. So I've been playing that with a family, and we're about halfway through our second campaign now.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about Daybreak. This is one of your more recent designs. So the theme of Daybreak is very unique, and you talked a little bit about the pandemic system and how you're like, okay, this would be a good theme to build a game around. For Daybreak, was the theme first, or were the mechanics first, or how did that work when you were developing that and designing that game?
Yeah, it was very much the idea of creating a cooperative game where the players would try to stop, basically stop climate change, right?
Yep.
And I started working on it during lockdown. I was kind of in the depths of, we're all doing a lot of like introspection and reflection during that time. It was a very different time. And I was kind of overwhelmed by the threat of this climate crisis, and thought that maybe one way to process it would be to work on a game. I had done Pandemic for the Pandemic, and a lot of people had mentioned, oh, you should do a climate game. There was one climate scientist in particular from Scotland who sent me this really long email saying, hey, you should do a pandemic system game about climate. So I started digging into it and realized that it deserved its own system. And I was doing this research when I stumbled upon Matteo Menapace, who became my co-designer. He had tweeted something on Twitter about the op-ed I had written about what Pandemic the board game can teach us about the pandemic. And he thought we could, it'd be cool to have a game that could teach us about the climate crisis. So we started up a conversation, and that led to a meeting, and then that was a weekly meeting, and three years later we had our game together. But it very much came out of researching the climate crisis, trying to figure out what kinds of technologies and policies could address it, and wrap my head around it, because I was full of legit despair about it. And it's difficult to read a lot of these books about it because they start talking about the stakes and they're really high. And it was only after a little while of doing some of this research that I realized, there are solutions. There is a way out of this, and I can model it, and then other people can play the game and understand what those models are, and then they can go on this journey, except it won't take them years. It'll just be like one afternoon or what have you. So that's where it came from. It was a lot of research, and it was very much theme first, and we discovered how to create mechanisms that model the dynamics of the problem and the solutions.
Yeah, and when I'm playing the game, I feel that those mechanisms are really tied to the theme, it's awesome. I love seeing, all the carbon cubes seem so overwhelming. There's so many of them, and then you see them going over to the thermometer, and actually you see the temperature rise on the thermometer if you're not, if you have too much carbon and you're not taking that out. I think you've just done a fantastic job marrying the theme with the mechanics of the game.
Yeah, it comes out of the actual trying to model what's actually happening. So that's also kind of scary, right? You, by playing it, you see the stakes, but you also see that because people have a hard time wrapping their head around what accumulation, how that works, right? You think, okay, this is bad, but how is it bad? It's like, well, you put this much excess in, and it's like a bathtub filling up, and use these metaphors, and they only go so far. But then when you actually viscerally play it, and you've got agency to make changes, you're like, oh my God, okay, now I really get it.
Yeah.
So it was great being able to kind of use all the language of the science, so that when people are playing it, they're actually using the vocabulary of all the problems and all the solutions, and actually, getting their feet wet with the understanding the dynamics.
And what I love about it too is, each card has a QR code on it. You scan it, and you can actually learn about what you're playing about, right? Which I think is just an amazing concept, right? I think that's really cool.
Yeah, there's over 200 cards in the game, and they all have a QR code, and they all link to a page that describes more detail. If you have questions about the gameplay, it's there. But then there's also all the background information about that solution or policy or crisis, what have you, and then even links for if you want to find out more or even take action. So it's kind of this nice way you can kind of tunnel in if you want to learn more and dig deeper.
Yeah, I loved that. I've only played on Board Game Arena, and being able to click on the link for each card and go to the web page that has all that information, it's fantastic. Was your hand involved in the UI of that web page as well, or?
A little bit. Matteo should get most of the credit for that. We also partnered with CMYK's got a great contact. Kristen, I'm trying to think of her last name, did an amazing job on the UI. Just a great team all around. And then we partnered with subject matter experts who also helped advise. So this is a totally new thing for me. Researching a game is one thing, and then putting it together. But this was researching something and then reaching out to the people who wrote the articles and the books to see if they would playtest, getting them to playtest, and then agree in many cases to actually write the content for the website for the game, which is taking it so much further. So it was really so rewarding to be able to share that information and have these exchanges. And sometimes I think for one card we had maybe 4 or 5 hours of meetings about how do we best represent this controversial card,
wow.
That so sort of thing. So I got into the science of it, and I don't by any means consider myself an expert, but as a generalist, you get to see this really big picture And I think the game actually provides a pretty good window into the larger, more holistic picture of what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting too. There's so much plastic in games nowadays. When you open up Daybreak, you see nothing. There's no plastic at all. It's almost an experience opening up that game, and even the presentation of it is the theme comes through there as well with the tuck boxes and the containers that are actual paper containers type of thing, which I think that's a nice touch with the game as well.
Yeah, we did a big life cycle analysis, just trying to figure out where the biggest impact was on the different materials in the game. And the person who was working on it, her name is Ruth. She's out of Berkeley. Told us that we really have to get rid of the cloth bag in the game. We had a bag where we could do a chit pull.
Oh, really?
And so Matteo and I, we scratched our heads and came up with a system that actually works better metaphorically and also in gameplay wise, which is that the planetary effects die.
Oh yeah.
And our advisors were like, oh, that's the perfect metaphor for it, So we were able to lighten the impact on that. I wouldn't have guessed that the cloth bag would have the most impact, but it did.
I wouldn't have guessed that either, but hey, learn something every day.
We've talked about the pandemic system and then the forbidden system. Do you see Daybreak potentially being the Daybreak system, or is this kind of a one and done thing, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, we have heard a lot of positive feedback around the tag and stack system. I don't know.
That's my favorite part
trademark.
Of the game.
I mean, it's the engine building system where you can quickly shift gears, and it's like an engine builder where you can. Yeah, you're not building a single engine. You run it once and then you're done. It's more like you're building up all this capability, and you have to be agile, and you have to be thinking and react to what opportunities you have at any given time. I think it'd be fun to develop something in that space, but don't have any current plans.
Cool. I love that tag and stack. That's fantastic.
If you have a better name for that, let me know.
No, I think that's perfect. And that's by far my favorite part of the game. It creates some super interesting decisions. I mean, you could have a stack of cards that have 5 of the plant tags, and you're getting trees like crazy. But you have to make a decision at some point. Do I cover that up because I need a different benefit?
Right.
And that whole decision is just fascinating. I think it's
fun to come up. We just stumbled over. I mean, it took a while to really develop the game. It was at least a couple of years, and when we started out, the thing took 4.5 hours to play. It was all about chipping away things and trying to fold things into other things. And when we came upon that stacking, we just found that it made people feel really powerful. And then you can get super powerful in an area that's no longer relevant, which is kind of fun. You're like, okay, well, we can keep making clean energy, but it's not going to solve the problem. We got to do these other things as well.
Yeah, I recently played a game, and I had gotten rid of all my dirty energy. But like you said, that stack was then worthless. I gotta do something else with it. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some good wins, but some brutal losses. So.
Yeah, that's right. Are there any other themes that you would like to explore that you've thought about?
Well, I've got some upcoming games that are not announced yet. That are. I'm trying to think. What else can I say?
You heard it first here, right? No.
Yeah, right. I guess in a broader sense, I'm more interested now in. Or I think I spend a little bit more time thinking about the meaning and intention, and try to be more intentional about the designs than I used to be. So, what is the underlying message of the games that I'm developing, and try to just stop and pause and think about that a little bit more than I used to. But specifically, I don't have anything I can really talk about, but yeah.
We'll keep our eye out for any announcements coming soon. Then we'll know what you're referencing.
Is there a designer that you haven't worked with that you would like to work with?
Oh, that's a great question. I have a ton of respect for Vlado Shvato, and he's just a really warm and generous guy. We used to have breakfast together at a conference. This would be fun to see him again. I think he'd be fun to work with, but I've just been able to. I've got myself lucky to be able to collaborate with a lot of great people. I have just a ton of respect for Knizia, but I'm not sure how that would work. I don't think he takes on co-designers.
Tyler,
He's been a hero of mine since, I don't know, for decades.
Yeah, Tyler and I, he mentioned, we had a chance to talk to him 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that was a highlight of the podcast. It was just so much fun.
I'm sure.
To
Yeah,
him.
He's such a groundbreaking designer.
He's had so much influence in board gaming for so many years.
Mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Vlada Shavato. It's interesting you mentioned him. Galaxy Trucker was one of the first games I really got into, and that game had so many fun experiences playing that game. He's just been a great designer for a long time, for sure.
So one of the games that is announced that's coming from you is Ziggurat.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a cooperative legacy game. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is a co-op game coming out of Mindware. It's for kids and families. So this is I guess you could say right around Forbidden Island, maybe a little bit younger. So
Okay.
8 and up. And what can I talk about? It's a legacy game. There's a big ziggurat. There's some secrets because it's the legacy game. I gotta come up with talking points for this. So chat with Mindware about what I can talk about. I can say that I developed it with Rob. Again, we had a good time with that.
Nice.
It's got a novel format to it. I think you can see in the photos. There's a storybook that comes with it. So it's a rather new way to receive the information for the game you're about to play. Which is kind of novel. And then the board, you can see from the photos, is actually 3-dimensional, which has been a lot of fun. Some of the bones of it are based on an earlier game I did for Peaceable Kingdom, which is part of Mindware, called Mole Rats in Space, or Space Escape. So what's kind of fun about the game is that it looks like ridiculously simple. It looks like almost like a co-op shoots and ladders in a sense. But you really do need to look ahead and plan and strategize, and the game progressively gets more crunchy as you play. That's about as much as I think I can say about it. But, I think it'll be a great introduction for people into the legacy format. It's deceptively deep, I think, when you're playing it.
Well, you've definitely piqued my interest for sure in that one.
It looked like it was a little bit shorter, like 6 games or...
Yeah, it's 6 chapters, and the game, I think it takes about half an hour to play a game, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the game. They get progressively a little bit crunchier.
So I'm excited to check that one out, especially with my younger kids. Like you said, if it's a good intro to kind of the legacy format, that's rather than jumping into Ticket to Ride Legacy or Pandemic.
It's a great stepping stone
into that one first, right?
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Any other games you've got coming out in 2024 that you want to talk about, or?
I'm glancing over the whiteboard. Let's see. What can I talk about? I have a dexterity game. I've mentioned this in many podcasts that's coming out. I believe this year. It has. I don't think it's really been announced yet. So keep your eye on that space. It's something I've been working on for like 6, 7, 8 years, something like that.
Oh, awesome.
Okay.
And this is probably my kid's favorite game of mine. So we played it to death. Love this game. So I'm very excited about that.
Fantastic.
And then there's some more coming, and you just have to stay tuned.
Yeah, like I said, we're looking forward to it for sure.
We'll say words and you nod or shake your head no.
Think twice for yes.
Yeah. So I do wonder, how many games are you working on at any one given time?
Well, I mean, it's tricky because they're at different stages. So some of them may be in just an opportunity, or they're in research, or they're in design or development or proofing or whatever. I think I'm tracking, about 10, 12, somewhere in the 10, 12 range right now.
Oh, wow. Cool. What did Reiner Knizia say, Tyler? He said he was working on 100, I think. Right?
Yeah, he said he had 100 drawers. He added a new 50 drawer system. He
bumped it up from 50 to 100 recently. So Maybe you could get up to that level one.
No. I'm quite comfortable not doing that.
That's a hard pass for you. Yeah.
That's a hard pass. Yeah. He has. I'm pretty sure he's got employees who are just tracking licenses for him.
Yeah.
It's so many games.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
When he tell you like 700 games or something like that, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. What's your favorite game? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, it's whatever I'm working on right now. That's my pat answer. Yeah, because it's always changing. There's some that I love to go back to, and many of them are Kinesia, so it'll be like El Dorado. We probably play more than anything. Love Beowulf. We played that this week. I think that's an underappreciated gem of his. What else? When I was a teenager, it was definitely Civilization. Yeah, there's some that come. Tigers and Euphrates is a classic.
Yeah, that one's awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, Matt. We appreciate it. And, we're excited to see what's coming from you in the future. We're always checking out, see what you've got coming, and we're excited. So
Yep.
All right,
thank you so much for joining us and for all the awesome games you've designed. They're just fun to explore. My game collection definitely wouldn't be the same without you. So thank you. And,
thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And thanks for sharing the love of games with everybody.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Tyler and Kevin, for that great interview with Matt Leacock. That was awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about Matt Leacock and talk about our review game today, which is Daybreak, a game designed by Matt Leacock. Our reviews, the way we like to do reviews, is we start off by talking about the production of the game that we are reviewing, and then we'll talk about the things we like, the things we dislike, and ultimately we'll end with our final thoughts where we rate it on a scale of 0 to 100. Each of us individually will determine where we land on that scale.
It makes me feel happy every time you describe our scale.
Yes, because it feels like your soul dies a little bit every time you mention that.
and I think it does, but that's it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for you guys. So.
I'm just excited about what increment of 10 you're going to rate.
Yeah. No. But before we jump into the full review of this game, we're going to turn it over to Kevin for the rules overview of Daybreak.
Daybreak is designed by Matt Leacock Matteo Menapace and published by CMYK with art done by Mods Berg. In Daybreak, you'll build the mind-blowing technologies and resilient societies we need for a warming planet. Each player takes the role of a different world power: China, Europe, the United States, and the majority world. All of you have a shared goal: cut carbon emissions before it gets too hot or too many communities are put into crisis. At the beginning of the game, everyone is generating massive amounts of carbon cubes from dirty energy and emission tokens on their player boards. Some of these cubes will be sequestered by tree and ocean tokens on the central board and have no negative effects. But you're all emitting way more carbon than the planet can handle. Those excess cubes go directly onto a thermometer that tracks global temperature rise. Once an entire row is filled with cubes, a temperature band is added, representing the planet heating up by 0.1 degrees Celsius. And if you ever have 8 temperature bands, you all lose. For each temperature band, you'll roll a planetary effects die, which represents the planet reaching critical ecological tipping points and makes the game more challenging. Rising temperatures also make you draw more crisis cards, which all reflect the various real-world impacts of climate change. Crisis cards are what endanger your communities, and if any player has 12 or more communities in crisis, everyone loses. So how do you protect your communities? You can build social, ecological, and infrastructure resilience. The more resilience tokens you have, the more protected you'll be. In order to win Daybreak, you need to reach drawdown. The moment you collectively remove more carbon from the atmosphere than you produce, drawdown is achieved. You'll do that by playing cards that remove dirty energy and emission tokens from your player board, while adding clean energy tokens to keep up with the energy demand of your world power. Everyone begins with 5 cards that are unique to their world power. Each round, players will draw from a huge deck of cards filled with unique actions. You'll be playing these from your hand to your play area. Cards can be played in 3 different ways. You can play a card in front of a stack to make its action available. You can tuck a card behind a stack, making the front card more powerful. You can also discard a card to pay the cost of some actions. Every card you play has 1 to 3 tags. Tags from all cards in a stack can be used to make powerful actions, helping all players. Daybreak is played in rounds until everyone wins or loses together. There is no player order. Everyone plays simultaneously. Rounds have 5 stages. There's the global stage, where players hold a global summit to review the forecast crisis card and select a global project card. There's the local stage, where players focus on their own boards, drawing and playing local project cards to remove emissions and dirty energy, add clean energy, increase resilience, and help their fellow players. There's the emissions stage, where players total the amount of carbon cubes generated this round, sequester as many as they can, and add the rest of the thermometer. There's the crisis stage, where players resolve planetary effects and crisis cards to show their impacts on the planet and its communities. And finally, there's the growth stage, where players check if they've won, and if not, they all increase their energy demand. Players win if drawdown is achieved before the end of the 6th round, and everyone survives the subsequent crisis phase. Players will lose if the thermometer has 8 temperature bands, any player has 12 communities in crisis, or players haven't won by the end of round 6. So that's a quick rundown of how to play. Let's get back to the table to see what we thought of Daybreak.
Thanks, Kevin, for that rules overview of Daybreak. So let's talk about this game. Start with the production. Daybreak is a unique game in its production. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about why that is with Daybreak?
Yeah, so we got a review copy of this from CMYK. They were nice enough to send it to us. It showed up at my house. It's one of those games that's not shrink wrapped, right? So it just has those little stickers to open it, which, yeah, I kind of feel the same way because, it's just open to all kinds of
your heart palpitates a little bit.
Yeah, potential issues of, ding in the box and stuff. But it came in really good shape. Opened it up. There is absolutely no plastic in this game whatsoever. There's no plastic insert. The packaging is really well done. There's tuck boxes for all of the cards, and the cards fit perfectly in there. But yeah, you notice that it was packaged this way and produced this way on purpose to be as eco-friendly as possible, right? Which is cool because it fits with the theme of the game. So that's the first thing I noticed about the production of the game.
It's probably not a game that you would choose to take with you when you're stranded on an island because the first time it gets wet, it's going to dissolve. I mean,
probably. Yeah. It's funny you say that because like the component trays are like paper. How would you describe
They remind me
those,
of
right?
takeout containers.
Yes.
Right? For leftover food or
almost
whatever.
like dissolvable straws or something.
Yes.
I mean, a
And
little bit thicker than that.
Kind of loose fitting lids that you can, just put on there. They're perfectly functional, right? But it is different to see that in a game because normally you don't see
I
that.
actually like those containers because they are dual purpose in that they're good for storing the game's components, but also I like having them because you can pass around the components as you need to, which I'm always a fan of. It reminds me of like Void Falls, the trays that you can pass around and things like that. Anytime you can make it so it's easier to access the components for players around the table, I'm for that. And I think Daybreak does a good job of that.
Yeah, and I'd flip the lids over and I'd use those as trays as well. So, I think I like the production. I think I think the art's done well. I think it looks good.
It's pretty simplistic.
It is. It's not over the top at all, but I think that fits with the theme as well. I think the art style.
Yeah.
I will say the box cover art stood out to me as being unique when I first saw it, and it made me wonder what the game was about and wonder about the game just looking at it. And so like it brought me in. I can't say that I loved the artwork on the box, but I do like a lot of the artwork on some of the components, and I think it's functional and it's really nice. I think one of my favorite pieces of artwork, though, has got to be the Bill sitting on Capitol Hill.
Right.
And, there's a Schoolhouse Rock reference I found in one of the cards that I was playing in the most recent game, and I still haven't seen if there's any other types of Easter eggs, but there was at least a Schoolhouse Rock Easter egg in there, and I liked that a lot. I thought it was a fun little touch.
Yeah.
I like the little tokens for everything. I don't know.
The clean energy, dirty energy, emissions tokens, all that. Yeah.
They're all really well done. The carbon pieces are cool too. I don't know. I think they did a great job with this, and it goes along with the theme, what they were trying to do and how they packaged it, right?
Yeah. 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 The dual layer boards, like the player boards, everything slots in well.
I love the little tracks for the emissions and the energy. That was really cool. How those tokens fit perfectly.
Even the countries that have like potentially more
I was going to say that.
energy requirements, right? Because I think, China or the majority world, you increase your energy 2 or 3 steps every round, which you're going to have a lot of energy to power those worlds, right? Or those parts of the world. So there's little extenders that you can put on to account for that. And the first time we saw that, like, why are they only available for 2 of these, countries? But it makes sense as you play because the energy requirements are more for those countries.
Or emissions. Like majority of the world starts with a full track of emissions that they put out.
Right.
And you may have bad situations, global crises or whatever that come out that cause you to add additional emissions to your track. So you may have to add more to that. And so I thought that was well thought out. And those components, I liked that they snapped together under.
Yep.
Right. And so you don't see the snap points for that. They go under the boards. And so it was just, I think it was well thought out. It was really nice. I like the production overall. There's nothing that I particularly dislike, but how about you guys? Anything about the production you don't really like?
This is a nitpick. There's a lot of dead space on the board. I felt like it could have been half the size.
Yes.
But it is what it is. That's a nitpick.
Which is problematic. It actually affects gameplay because this game, later in the game, it's just you need more space, right?
You do.
Because your stacks are getting bigger and bigger. And like we've mentioned before, we've got some pretty large game tables. We played it in the vault of mine, and I kind of wish I would have put the top on the table because it was a little bit cramped, right?
Yeah.
And they really could have consolidated that board in the middle just to make a little bit more area to play.
And it's not quite the table hog as Voidfall.
Not
but quite. We had to work things. We had to work some magic to get our tableau of cards to start fitting. And
as the stacks got bigger and bigger, it just became a little bit more difficult. Small nitpick. That's not a big deal, but it's just something to be aware of.
The other thing that maybe now that I'm thinking about it, that I don't know that I love in the physical version of the game as much is the threat. I can't remember the thermometer, the temperature bands, right, that you're putting on. There is, when you're trying to count it, if you're playing a 4-player game, there are 20 different cube spots on the board
for each
temperature band.
Yep.
And you're counting them out and putting them on the spaces and counting them up. And there's a lot of management going on between these cubes. Where do they go? How do they place? It's a little bit tedious at times to kind of just manage all of the carbon that it is. It's not the part of the game that you want to be playing. You want to get to the action of the game, and it's just maintenance that you're doing that is upkeep that I don't really necessarily. It's not the fun part.
It's nice that BGA takes care of it.
Yes.
It is nice, and that is a little tedious. I can completely see why it was done that way, because you see this overwhelming amount of carbon that's in your recent emissions, and there's a ton of cubes, especially at the beginning of the game, and it feels overwhelming to start the game, right? But I agree with you. You got to put them actually on the forests. You got to put them on the oceans. You got to put them on the direct air capture, and that, you got to put all. You put all those together just to make it easier, right? But it is a little bit tedious to do that.
Yes.
And then you got to put the remainder on the thermometer, and then you got to put a temperature band on, and it's okay, it's a little.
And then you clear it off if you filled it your thermometer up, and then however many extra you put on the next level, right?
It is nice that the carbon units come in both 1s and 5s.
Yes.
So that helps with that a little bit. If it was all 1s, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't detract from my ultimate experience with the game, but it is something that I think when it's on the table, it increases the playtime of the game
Yeah, I was
because you're
surprised with
sitting
our
there
playtime.
trying to figure out counting everything out. It's just mathing out, like counting out specific numbers of saying, making sure you have it. And I could make mistakes of like, oh, did I count this one already or did I not? Like,
Well, that's why you put
unless
the actual,
you're physically putting it on there,
Which you
is
should
why
do.
you don't want to skip out on that, like because you could mess that up.
Yeah. It's a little bit of upkeep for sure. But like I said, I think it's very thematic because it gives you a visual representation of
Totally
actually what you're doing. But yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, anything else about the production that we want to talk about before we move on to what we like about Daybreak? Let's talk about that. What are some of the things that stand out about Daybreak that you guys like?
So I love the card play.
Yep.
Like the card play
Hands
is
down.
by far my favorite part of the game. The fact that it has these tags, that your project stacks are getting more and more powerful the more tags that you have. I love the fact that you can take an action, and then you can cover that action immediately, and then take a new action with the tag on the card that you took the action before. It's just, you're getting more and more powerful. You see these cards in your hand, and it's almost, there's so much information, or like when you get that first hand of 5 cards, like, what do I want to do with this, right?
And how do I do it?
And how do I want to do it? I know I have energy requirements I need to meet. We got to get rid of these emissions. There's a global project we want to fund. There's a crisis we've got to prepare for. What am I going to do with these cards? And then actually playing those, and it's just a super satisfying and fun experience. I love that.
It's cool too that each player starts with their specific country cards already set out. So they have base cards to start with.
Yep.
But I agree, the card play of stacking those cards, I need this symbol and I'm going to put it underneath my deck so I can use the top card and get way more out of it. I love that play, those decisions. That is by far the best part of this game.
Hands out.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what other people do with this type of system in future games.
Well, I think that it's more than just what you guys have talked about, because the more you play with this system, because you can get global crises that cause you to have to discard cards later on, right? There are other things that you can think about that sometimes I don't want to cover a card.
It's painful.
Because it's really valuable.
Right.
But I need
if
to
I
cover
used
it
it
right
this
now.
round and-
But
Yeah.
if I pay attention and I see a crisis is coming up that tells me if I don't meet this requirement, I'm going to have to discard. And usually that's a really bad thing. I can sometimes make that work in my favor and be like, okay, well, I'm going to put this one down because I need this action right now. But if I have to discard one, I can discard this one off the top.
And then you can take it
and
again.
reveal the one that I really want to
Yeah.
stay there for next time. And now I can do more actions there. So the layers of decisions that you have with that card play mechanism, I think is amazing. And there's so, like, I'm discovering more and more with every play.
Yeah.
Well, and it feels good when something that's supposed to be a penalty, you can turn into your
Yes.
advantage and use it to your advantage. I love that.
Yeah, it's very satisfying. The card play is super satisfying. I love that. I also love just the visual representation of the emissions, and it's a satisfying thing to get your
For sure.
dirty energy down and get your clean energy up, and to see that progression. You're like, okay, I'm only contributing 9 carbon cubes this round, and then you look over at somebody else and they've got 15 or something like that. But it's like, but it's super satisfying. It's super fun to get that engine going.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm going to discard this card. I've got 4 of these tags, which means just boom, 4 dirty energy gone. And then I got another stack of cards where I'm going to discard a card and I can put 4 clean energy. Boom. And you do that on a turn. Just that engine building part of it is really cool, really satisfying. And then seeing that visual representation on the board is really cool.
It's interesting in this game that you, as an individual, can play extremely well, and then things just don't go the collective group's way, and you end up losing. We had a game recently on BGA that I thought for sure we were going to win. I didn't even finish. I don't know that I had any communities in crisis. I had almost everything. Dirty
I did.
energy gone.
You and I were right there.
I felt like I played the perfect game and yet we lost.
I felt the same way. And here was what happened. I was the last one to take the turn, so I got to see pretty much everything that you guys had already done. And so on BGA, it's simultaneous, but if you're not taking turns at the same time, the last person is going to be just like playing later. So I was the last one to get to my turn, and I noticed, I could do all of these things and get our emissions all the way down so we get to drawdown.
Yep.
And then I can make sure that I can get enough so that in the event that something were to happen next round, I'd be safe. But what I wasn't considering was the fact that Kevin had like 84 communities in crisis, or he was about to have 84.
I had 4 left that I could get, right? And the problem was I didn't have any resiliency tokens. So we spent all this effort to get to drawdown, but I didn't have enough resiliency tokens for the unexpected crises that were going to come.
And I discarded a card instead of using it that would have allowed me to discard communities in crisis off of another player, but I didn't realize at the time that
I was in a bad spot.
that you didn't have your resilience tokens, and so it's like, oh no, we're in trouble, and we didn't have all the global crises revealed, so we didn't know what was coming up. So it has this ability to have what you were saying, Tyler, feeling like I'm doing really well with what I'm doing, but if I'm not paying attention or at least communicating with others what we're doing, then you could be in some real trouble, which is the kind of cooperative game that I personally really enjoy. I like to be able to focus on my own play space and be able to make decisions that feel impactful and that are making good things. Being able to get rid of all of my dirty emissions and get rid of my emissions and get rid of my dirty energy, will help everybody. But if I'm not paying attention to the global objectives, then I'm in trouble. And I really like that. So for me, the ability to not quarterback this game is a huge benefit to it as a cooperative experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned the crisis cards. I love that you can see one, right? But then depending on where those energy bands are, you could have unknown crisis cards that you don't know about and you can't necessarily prepare for, which can be hard and frustrating. You don't know what resiliency tokens you need, for example, or you don't necessarily know what you need in order to protect yourself. There are cards that let you flip over those, right? Which that's another decision. Do I keep that card and take that action, or do I use it for a tag, right? Because, it can be very beneficial to know what's coming so you can prepare for it. Well, but that unknown is kind of exciting and kind of fun when you flip those over and you're like, oh no, I'm in a bad spot, or oh, okay, I have these resiliency tokens to be able to cover myself for this, which is kind of cool.
A fun combination that came out in the game that we played on the table. Tyson had a couple cards that let him reveal those crisis cards at the end, and I had one that let me remove one.
Yes.
So, like 2 or 3 rounds in a row, Tyson would flip them over, and then we'd get to pick the most damaging one and get rid of it. And that felt really good. So there is some fun synergies and combos that do happen between players with the cards that they have in front of them. So
well, and there's a lot of cards out there too that are incentivizing that teamwork, because while you can be focused solely on your own stuff, there are things that are like help your teammates get rid of crises.
One of your teammates.
Yeah, pass a card that has this tag to a teammate,
or you can utilize specific things from others, or you can pass your own communities in crises to other players and things like that. So I like that it does a good job of having bottleneck moments where we have to collectively make a decision and work together, but then also go back to doing your thing, and it usually will work for the most part, and I like that a lot.
Yep. The global projects are cool. I like those. That just is another decision that you need to make as a group. That's probably where the most collaboration in the game comes, is the crisis cards and then the global project cards, because I have this card that I can tuck under this global project to activate it, or I need to get rid of this emissions, and then I have 0, so then it becomes active, and you guys can get rid of that emission. So that is where a lot of the collaboration comes in the game, and where you're talking, as a group. And I think those global projects are a lot of fun.
I think just some of the individual cards are so much fun. There's a few cards that let you draw up to 8 cards, and for any card of those 8 that have one of 2 symbols on them, you get to keep and add to your hand. And sometimes I had 2 of those cards at one point, so I was drawing 16 cards.
Yeah.
And sometimes I didn't get hardly anything, and sometimes I'd get a little bit more, but that felt powerful. There was another one that I had that was fun. It was, roll a die and add, based on the number of symbols of a certain type that you had, add those together with the die value. And depending on that, you might lose resiliency. You might add 1 wave or add 2 waves to the board. And that was just really fun. It created a couple of fun moments. And when I did it, it worked out in our favor, luckily, because it could be really detrimental to lose resiliency. But
adds a little bit of a pressure luck element, which is cool. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I like most about the game, from both the experience of playing the game and a thematic standpoint, is that it feels like it's a locomotive, right? Like, you start this game where there's a ton of emissions, a ton of carbon out there, and there's so much to kind of overcome that it feels really difficult to overcome that. And then you start to not be clearing that carbon fast enough that you start adding temperature bands. And the more temperature bands you have, the more that contributes to some of these crises.
Crisis cards and the environmental effect die that you roll.
Yeah, right. You're rolling that environmental effect die, and you might hit a tipping point, and then it adds additional stuff, and it just kind of is this cascade of bad that can easily feel like it gets out of hand. And it feels like it's moving at you super fast, like a locomotive, but then similar to like a train, right? To slow it down, it takes some time to get it to slow down, but then it comes to a slow and deliberate stop when you have figured it out, and I really like that about it.
It reminds me a little bit of Pandemic, where you think you're smooth sailing, and then all of a sudden an outbreak triggers another outbreak, triggers another outbreak.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Whoa, I guess we just lost.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah, and I think any good cooperative game has that feeling of like impending doom, right? It's like, there's no way I can come back from this. But then when you do, it's just super satisfying and super fun. So the start of this game very much gives you that feeling where like you're almost always adding 2 temperature bands immediately, or close to 2 temperature bands immediately. And you're like, oh gosh, we got to slow this down, So I think any good cooperative game gives you that feeling. And I think this one does it great.
Let's talk a little bit then about some of the things that may not be our favorite experience with this game. Are there things about this game that you don't necessarily like?
So, I mean, I don't know if I don't like this. It may be something to be aware of, and it's kind of weird for a cooperative game. It's almost, for a big chunk of the game, multiplayer solitaire, because you have your cards, and it's almost like, okay, I'm going to put my head down, look at these cards, figure out what I want to do, and then pop up every once in a while and say, hey, we got a global thing we got to work on here. Does anybody have this card? Oh, no, we don't want to do that. Okay, then you're back down.
I can give a card to someone.
Yeah.
Does anybody need a card?
Exactly.
Right? Like, yeah.
But it's you're kind of doing your own thing, which was a little bit weird for me at first. I'm like, well, is everybody's playing simultaneously? That's kind of strange. Where's the collaboration here on on this cooperative game? So that was kind of strange at first. And the more I played it, the more it doesn't really bother me, but it's kind of something to be aware of, I think.
I think that was kind of something Tyson liked about it, though,
it is
right?
usually something I like about it, but I do also wonder with this, is that a playstyle contingent kind of a thing? Because I can see other groups doing a lot more talking with this, And one of the problems I see with that is there are a fair amount of things that you could talk about where, hey, I need this kind of card. Does anybody have a card that'll pass me this? Like, can we exchange? There are a lot more things that we could have been doing in our plays to be more collaborative that we chose not to do. And I think primarily we chose not to do it because it actually was more efficient and saved time, and we didn't really want to min-max everything, and I think you could get into a position of potential AP if you went to figure out every way how we're going to make everybody's turns work together.
Let's discuss what cards Tyson's going to play now.
What cards does everybody have in their hands? What cards?
It's all open information, right?
Exactly.
Because you're supposed to lay out the cards that are in your hands, so everybody can see those. That is another space issue that I think a lot of people have. But really, you're supposed to be able to see what everybody has, and that's an advantage of playing on BGA because you can go click on that person and see, this is what they're playing. This is what their
you don't have to walk across the table.
This is the cards that they have.
Yeah.
If you're playing, a real time game, then it's a little bit easier to do that. But yeah,
totally. I really liked it on BGA. We played most of our plays on BGA. I've only played it on table once, and I was surprised at how long the play took. It took 2.5 times longer than I thought it was going to for us to play it on table.
I think it could have played longer too if we were doing some of the things that we
collaborated a little more and talked
and,
through.
And that's my big concern is that, like, unless you're willing to play as we played and was like, Kevin, Tyler, I trust you guys to be able to make the wise decisions of what you're doing, right? Like I don't need to know everything you're doing. Let's just figure out what we're doing and then come up when we need to talk about it for certain things.
Which I think is a fine way to play.
I do too.
I think it is too, but we play like Cthulhu Death May Die, right? We introduce that to a lot of new players when we have bigger game nights, and it's so easy to teach that as you go when it's their turns and by them observing your turns. You can't do that in this game. You kind of need to do a whole rules teach at the start because they're going to be expected to do stuff independently to keep the flow of the game going. Yep. And we've mentioned this before. That's one of the benefits of most cooperative games is you can kind of give a base level rules overview and then teach the game as you go to a new player. And you can't do that in this
because
game. That's a nitpick, but
because you're going turn by turn, right? So now it's Tyler's turn. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
right. In most cooperative games, that's what you do.
Here are your options.
But this one, it's like, okay, now it's everybody's turn. Go.
Yeah.
So
and I don't think it's overly complex of a rule set, but it is. No. It is more tactical of gameplay that. I don't know that I would necessarily play this with like people who are new to I would play Pandemic with a lot of people who are new to board games, but I wouldn't play Daybreak with the same group.
I don't know that I would. I would continuously add new people to it.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good progression. Right.
Yeah.
It's like maybe this is what you go to after you play Pandemic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's maybe a little bit a step above that.
And it's not overly complex, like I said.
It's not. It is not. No.
But it's not something I'd feel comfortable. Like, hey, we just played Pandemic. Let's play this one next as your next game that you've played. Like, maybe let's figure out a game or two before that.
Yeah, it's not a gateway game.
No, I don't think so.
Now, I don't know that that's not a negative that it's not a gateway game.
It's just something to be
it's just
aware of.
an awareness thing, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that probably wraps up our general thoughts of this game. Let's move into our final thoughts of Daybreak. Who wants to kick us off with the starting rating of Daybreak?
I'll go. I really like this game. I think it's fantastic. The card play just gets me excited to play this game. I love the tag and stack mechanic or whatever you want to call it. It's so satisfying to get a huge stack of projects and then pull off a powerful action, and then go, well, we're getting close to the end of the game here. I'm going to cover up that amazing stack with another card that's going to use all the tags that I've already built up and take another amazing action. Like, it's just such a satisfying experience. Like I talked about, it's seeing the progression of the game, all those carbon cubes and emissions that you have on your board and on the board in the middle of the table, and seeing that overwhelming number and then seeing that get smaller and smaller as the game progresses as you're working together is just a super satisfying experience as well. I think the art's done great. The production is really good. There's really not a whole lot I don't like about this game. There's a little nitpick of maybe a little bit of a multiplayer solitaire feel, but if that doesn't bother you, then it's not a big deal at all, and it doesn't really bother me a ton. I just think it's a great cooperative design that I think I'll go back to time and time again, both on the table and in the BGA app implementation, which I think is done really well. So final score for me, I think I'm going to go with a 91 on this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's up next?
You want to go next?
You go. I'm
go
going to still put my thoughts together a little bit.
I was going to go last, but I will happily talk about it. Overall, I really like this game, but the one thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot to was that in this game, I've played it 6 times now, and at first, I thought that the huge stack of cards was going to be like, we're not going to see that whole stack of cards. There's a lot of stuff in this game. I could go through this multiple plays and not see everything. But I think that with the ability to draw as many cards as you do, you kind of cycle through the cards a lot in this game, and you see a lot of the content pretty quickly. So it doesn't really change up. Just how they come out is going to change up. And then additionally, one of the things that concerns me potentially is that the starter sets, you're always going to start with either USA, Europe, China, or majority of the world as one of the play groups you have. And they always have the same 5 starting cards. Mm-hmm. And so if you see those same 5 starting cards, you know kind of the strategies to go. I think that has positives and negatives to it. The positive is you know what you want to get doing quicker and you don't have to waste time doing it. But for me, I started to notice, I've played majority of the world 3 times now. I kind of have the same moves that I want to do almost every time. Hide this card, add this, tuck cards behind this one, get some more things. And so I kind of had the same strategy with certain areas. That's just, again, some nitpicks. I think the game is really good. What you said, Kevin, about the card stacking mechanic, and Tyler, you said it earlier, it's the best quality of this game. The clever decisions that you're trying to make by stacking cards behind or stacking them in front or choosing to discard cards is really rewarding. I've enjoyed every time I do that. And even hearing the description of that was really exciting to me. I've enjoyed this as a cooperative game probably higher than almost any other cooperative game of this same nature in a long time. And for me, this is a pandemic killer. Like, I would play this over Pandemic any time you brought both of them out. At least vanilla Pandemic, right? I haven't played all of the other versions of Pandemic, but I like this system generally better than I like the Pandemic system. I think it's a really good game, and it highlights exactly why Matt Leacock is a masterclass cooperative designer. For me, it should be noted that this is not my favorite style of game, so my rating may be lower as a result of that. But at the end of the day, I put this as an 80 out of 100, where I really like this. I think that if you like this style of game, you will love this game, and it's a lot of fun, even if you don't necessarily like cooperative games.
It is better than vanilla Pandemic. I would agree with that. And as a vanilla Pandemic killer, as you mentioned, there are other types of Pandemic or other iterations of Pandemic that aren't the legacy ones that I would choose over this game. Something we didn't talk about in production, but I think is super cool. Each card has a QR code on it. And there's a companion website that when you scan that QR code, it goes to an individual page for that card, gives you a little bit of story, back info but then also explain what the card does. And after you get a couple plays, the iconography is really easy to understand, and you don't really need to do it. But the fact that they created a separate website and went to the level of effort that they did with that, and including the QR codes on each card, that's
phenomenal.
Really cool.
Even to the extent of if that issue is important to you, there are links that you could actually go to support that, which, there's so much work that was done in that part of the game. Yeah.
So I really liked playing this on Board Game Arena. I had fun playing on the table. It was a really exciting game. We almost went to draw down in one round. We were trying to figure it out, and we came up 1 or 2 carving cubes short. And that was exciting. And then the next round, we were able to do it, and we won. And it was exciting. But the game took forever. It was a really long play. I like this game. I don't love it. I don't love the art. I like dungeons and I like space themes, and the theme doesn't do a lot to draw me back, I guess. I think it's something passionate for Matt Leacock, clearly, and he talked about that. And in our interview, I don't know how much I want to play this again. Like, I want to play it on Board Game Arena. I don't care if I ever play it again on the table. And it's not something I would play with my family or, like I said earlier, introduce over and over again to new players like I would other cooperative games. I think it's a really clean design. The tag and stack system, is that what it's called? Tag and stack?
I don't think it has a name, but we'll call it that.
We're going with that. Like, think of all the tags that you get on your Arc Nova cards and Terraform Mars, right? How they were incorporated into this system. I want to see this system used in other games. I'm excited to experience that system and variations of that system in the future, because I think it is really well done. It's not my favorite, and I'm going to give it a 73.
Are you surprised that Tyler went lower than me, Kevin?
That's right. Yeah. I'm surprised. I'm surprised by that.
Look, 73
that's pretty good.
On BGG is still a really good game. Right? A 7.3,
7.3
right?
is
so
it's pretty good.
It's a good game. It's just for me, and I think there are tons of people out there that are going to love this game, especially if they love Pandemic or other Matt Leacock cooperative games, and then they evolve to this new system if it becomes a system. It's just not for me as much, I think.
Well, it's a no-brainer evolution. If you're playing Matt Leacock Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert games as your first games, right? Then you go to the Pandemic, then you go to Daybreak. It's a good progression.
I think it's a great evolution.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And it teaches you great gaming techniques and design techniques, and he's a masterclass cooperative designer. He does amazing
He's
jobs.
the first name that you think of when you think of cooperative games, easily.
Yeah. No, he does a fantastic job. And
I will contradict Tyler on one thing. I actually liked my table plays better than the BGA play.
Yep,
because you have the tension and you can have the discussion. And like BGA, it can end and not really see what happened. Like in the game that Kevin
you come back to it and you're like, oh, we lost. And then you kind of look through the log and you're like, oh, okay.
And I think you miss out on some of that without the table play.
I totally agree with that.
And I liked that a lot, actually having that tension of, are we going to make it or aren't we going to make it? And I like watching the resolution of, okay, let's check out these global crises.
And that collaboration probably would not have happened on BGA.
It wouldn't.
Right?
Correct.
We wouldn't have had that discussion. Are we going to be writing in chat that, hey, let's do this and let's do that? We weren't even playing at the same time necessarily. We wouldn't be playing at the same time necessarily. And the play time, I didn't even notice that it was a longer game, right? That didn't even cross my mind for me. I was just engaged in the game and enjoyed the game as we played it.
Yeah.
So I didn't get get that feel of a long play for me.
It wasn't painstakingly long. It was just it took a lot longer than I thought it would. I was still having fun the entire time. It took a lot longer than I thought.
It was a higher time commitment than I had gone into it thinking it would be.
Right. Because the plays on BGA feel so quick and fast.
And that was with us playing multiplayer solitaire, like primarily, right? Like we weren't as collaborative as we could have even been, which would have increased the playtime. That's one of my concerns with it.
Yeah, it could have, but even then, for me, I don't think it would have detracted from the game at all. Just because I enjoy the mechanics of the game so much, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And getting that hand of cards and then trying to figure out what it does, and there is some collaboration, like I said, with the global projects and the crisis cards. We talked a lot about the crisis cards. That's where most of our collaboration came from. It's like, oh, we got to prepare for this. It's like, we know what's coming. How can we get resiliency tokens to somebody that needs them? And we talked multiple times about who has the lowest resiliency tokens or who has the lowest of this, because it's going to affect this person, right? And they're going to get communities in crisis. And then we had those moving over to Tyler, which was hilarious because we were trying to get like him to not have many. And then we flipped over a card that says move him to the person to your left. It was like, that was awesome.
Well, I had given some away or something, and then they came right back to me, plus more.
Yeah, which was hilarious. And that would have been completely lost on BGA, right? So having that experience in person was, I think, was fun.
Do you feel like this has a ton of replayability in the sense of there's still a lot to explore?
No, that was my concern with what I was saying, was that I do worry that I've seen pretty much everything for it at this point after 6 plays. There's more I could understand from strategy standpoint and things like that, but I don't know that I'm going to be discovering a whole lot more. And I also... I initially thought it was going to be a really hard game because it was hard to win at first. But the majority of the games I've played,
we've won,
have been a win.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about that though. But there are cards that you can add to the game to make it harder, right?
That's true.
So I would love to explore those to see how it changes up the game, right?
Yeah, there's ones that make it easier, harder, and then there's also a little more variance. And I think that's what we've added in our current game on BGA.
Oh, did we add that? I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so I don't know. That was one of my concerns too, is that I feel like I've played this country enough, you know.
I could see the argument of the countries, and like you mentioned, Tyson, there may be a play style that you gravitate towards with that country.
Right.
I think there is variability in the global projects. There's a huge stack of those that come out. And there's variability there. There's variability in the crisis cards, not knowing what's going to come up and not seeing nearly all the crisis cards during the game. So there's variability there. You do go through that card stack of projects fairly quickly. And you think there's maybe more variability than there is because there's some that are almost identical, but they have maybe 1 or 2 different tags on them. Right?
Different symbol, yeah, exactly.
Yep. So there's not quite as many. It's not like every card is completely unique. There's some that do a lot of similar things and just have a slight variation on the tags. So I could see that, as maybe being a little bit of an issue.
But I also don't see this being the game that... It's not a lifestyle game. It's not a game that you're going to sit here and play every night for the next month or two, right?
You come back to it every few months, and you have a good time, and you have fun, and then maybe you come back in a few months after that. It's not like a Voidfall where you're going to have a million different scenarios that you can play, and that type of thing. But
I am excited to see if this becomes a system like Pandemic, right? Because I love trying to keep the barbarians from sacking Rome in a pandemic system. I love fighting the cultists in the Cthulhu one. I love trying to keep the Netherlands from flooding.
But is there variation in those games, right? Like, is there the same amount of variation in the Fall of Rome Pandemic as there is in Daybreak? Is it just a matter of the theme resonates more with you than the theme of this one?
The base system's still there, right?
Sure.
But yeah, the theme does resonate more with me in those games. There's the Star Wars one, the World of Warcraft one. I mean, there are some cool pandemic system games out there, right? That have very unique and themes that are I'm already a fan of, or have a close personal, like the Netherlands one, where you're trying to keep it from flooding. I lived in the Netherlands. That's where part of my heart is, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I love that. It just didn't strike.
Yeah, so it's not so much maybe a mechanics theme.
No, I think the mechanics are great
thing, but it may be more of a theme thing. Those other types of genres resonate more.
Right. And so I would love to see if this system becomes a system officially, and there are more games in this design space, right?
I would happily play more games
Absolutely.
I would
in
too.
this design space.
By Matt
with the
Leacock.
system.
Yeah, absolutely.
That tweak it up a little bit.
Yeah.
He has so many iterations of Pandemic, right?
Well, it would make that
system
fresh in a way that while I've played it half a dozen times at this point and I've enjoyed every one of it, if I had a new version of it, like it would revitalize it for me.
Well, I mean, kind of like how Witchcraft expanded upon Resist, right? I mean, I look forward to hopefully some future iterations of this.
Yep.
I did think it was interesting. I don't always check like the history logs on my board game arena games. And with Daybreak, I was looking quite a bit at the logs to see, hey, what happened after I passed? And then Tyson finally passed, or Kevin finally passed, and then all the end of the round stuff. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, we got a bunch of cubes from this, and we didn't have enough carbon, and blah, blah, or we had too much carbon. And I check the history way more than I do normally on my plays. So
yeah, I was doing the same for sure.
Well, I think that wraps up our review of
we kind of had our
Daybreak.
final thoughts and then had a whole nother discussion.
A review of it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Rehashed it. But overall, I think that if you like Matt Leacock, you like cooperative, and even if you don't like cooperative and you want to try something out that may tickle your fancy, if you don't, try Daybreak. I think it's worth the experience. It's been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and this coming from the non-cooperative guy.
Yeah.
So that's pretty glowing endorsement right there.
I think that wraps up our episode. We're thankful for Matt Leacock being available for a fun interview. We always love talking to designers. It was great to talk about the games that we've been playing lately and do a feature review of Daybreak. We have a new affiliate link at Boardlandia, one of my favorite online gaming stores. We'll put that link in the show notes. If you have a second, give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to us. That helps us, more people to find us, right? So thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
Later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more Longest Turn in your life, please check us out on Instagram. Also, be sure to check us out on Board Game Geek, where you can join our guild, Guild 3947, and check out our blog, where we post all our show notes and occasionally post more detailed reviews. If that's not enough for you, we have a Discord server. If you want to play a game with us on Board Game Arena, join our Board Game Arena group, The Longest Turn. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Tot ziens.
Goodbye.
See you later.
Square.
No, but like in a diamond type shape.
Say, what's a four-sided shape? Square.
Square works. Yeah.
Rhombus. It is a
Rhombus. Nice job.
So it's a bunch of rhombuses.
Rhombi.
Oh, a bunch of rhombi on the board.
I have no idea if that's what it is.
We're going with rhombi.
Rhombi,
A bunch of rhombi that are interconnected that lead you to the other side of the board. So if you're not familiar with what a rhombi is, or a rhombus, it's basically two triangles.
A square tilted on its axis. It's a diamond.
We spent so much time on this. This shape.
I need to get the degrees right. It's not a perfect square, though.
No, it's like
it's
a slant.
Yeah. It's a slanted square on its side.
Right. This kind of squished a little bit.
Yeah, but if it's not on its side, it would also be that shape. Anyway, plenty of editing to do.
Can you talk a little bit more about the rhombus?
The rhombi, please.
Oh, the rhombi.
Production and theme. We do a rules summary by Kevin.
Oh, that's right.
We did not jump into that.
Which we will do later because I don't have it prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I got it. But before we get into our full review, let's turn it over to Kevin for the review. Oh, the review? Just do the whole review by
Outtakes,
yourself,
yay!
Kevin. That'll be great. I appreciate it.
I love fighting Cthulhists and
Cultists?
cultists. That's what I meant.
Cthulhu.
Yes.
Cthulhists.
I made a new word.
That's
It's
amazing.
not the first one. in
I
this
love
episode.
fighting them too.
No,